How long have you been in Utah?
18 months, and then before that, a year and a half in Miami.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I saw where Afterburner was in Florida, and then I saw where you were in Utah. So I was like, how long has Boo been in Utah?
Yeah, yeah, well, mate, it was a I didn't love living in Miami. Um, so we came here for a holiday, flew my kids out from Australia, and then when we're here, we're like, this place is amazing. Like, it's
Pretty
got
cool.
everything. Yeah. Where are you calling in from?
Yeah, so I'm in Nashville.
Okay. Oh, that was the other that we were gonna move to Nashville.
Okay,
And then, yeah,
small
so
world.
we drove Miami, Nashville. We spent 2 weeks in Nashville. Loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
And then we got to Park City and we're like, "Oh, yeah, this is great too." And
yeah.
we don't have to drive all the way back now, so let's just stay here.
Yeah, small world. No, met my wife here, and so we're here now. And no, I was in Arizona a few days ago. I go on a golf trip. We were actually talking about Utah maybe being a destination next year. So
Yeah, it's
maybe
good,
I'll end
man.
up even closer to you. But no, Boo, man, this has been exciting. I wish I'd have pushed record as we just kicked off because it was pretty cool. You were letting me know you heard about Books4Guys recently in another group that you were talking and working with, and so it's really cool to hear the Books4Guys name, getting thrown around out there in a positive way. And very excited to talk with you because your story, man, it's very interesting. When I got introduced to you through email, I started looking it up and I was like, okay, so Boo was a fighter pilot in Australia, then went to Afghanistan after being medically discharged, spent some time there, did some cool things, went back to Australia. Then some more growth happened, and now you've been with Afterburner. You've got a couple books out, one you co-authored, obviously Afterburner, and then you got another one coming out later this year. And I just kind of gave a high level summary there, but man, I would love for you to just take over for a few minutes and just share your story because it is interesting, and especially through Afterburner, what you guys do with companies. And I saw the New York Giants thing. I'm a big football fan, so I was like, dang, this is really really interesting how you take that fighter jet approach and incorporate it into business and helping leaders be more successful in what they're trying to do. But man, in your words, tell your story a little bit and just kind of where that's led to now.
Yeah, look, I truly am, on a mission, not of my own doing. And if you look at how my career has unfolded, you couldn't really plan it. I mean, my whole purpose in life now is to build a movement of flawless leaders. And by flawless leader, we define that as a leader who invests 100% in what they can control and adapts intelligently and calmly to what they cannot. And this whole word flawless, humans being humans, we tend to conflate things and put everything in the same basket if it kind of sounds the same. And flawless and perfection are often used interchangeably, even by the field of psychology. But the reality is they're two very different words. Perfection has its origins in Latin. It's a scholastic term and it's a theoretical term, and it kind of means whole in all parts, which means both what you can and what you can't control. And anything that incorporates what you can't control into 100% is really not doable. But unfortunately, the way a human's internal narrative works is we tend to work in black and white and absolutes, and as a result, we suffer from undiagnosed perfectionism. And there was a study that was completed a few years ago, which is the thesis of my new book, Flawless Leadership, which demonstrated that 86% of leaders, they don't label it perfectionism, but when they unpack it, it's like, yeah, I'm trying to be perfect all the time. And the problem with trying to be perfect is the way we see perfection is through control, and that leaders need to control everything to make it perfect, which is impossible, right? And sadly, all of that control means that you become overwhelmed, and then the more overwhelmed you become, the less effective you are, the more perfection disappears off into the distance. So it's like a reinforcing cycle that I call the perfection death spiral, because at the bottom is burnout and really disengagement, which are two of the biggest problems leaders are dealing with right now. Burnout's never been higher and engagement's never been lower. So we can free ourselves of this. And the pathway to freedom is this concept of flawlessness, which is the pursuit of perfection and acknowledging that it's never going to happen. Vince Lombardi famously quoted, gentlemen will never be perfect, but through the pursuit of perfection, we catch excellence. And the origin of the word flawless is actually Nordic. It's from the Vikings, and it talks about a rock being unbroken. That is a flawless rock, and I kind of like that. A bit like a diamond. A diamond can be flawless. It can be have no occlusions, perfect clarity. But the minute we give it to a jeweler, it can become imperfect because the diamond can't control that. So this is something that, yeah, I never knew it at the time, but this is the program that the Air Force instills into the fighter pilot. It instills excellence, and there's never an expectation that you're going to be perfect. And that release of I have to be perfect is very powerful. And it's been a very subconscious thing for many years. I mean, I'm 52 this year, and it's only in the last few years as I deconstruct the pathway to becoming a fighter pilot and then being a fighter pilot and then being a leader in the world of fighter pilots and testing that against hundreds of studies done around the world, that you realize, you know what, they built this system to unprogram survival thinking, which is what humans run on. And they engineered a way of thinking that's actually designed to thrive and to be super effective no matter what the circumstances are. So as you look at the psychology of a fighter pilot, you look at the mindset piece. When we hear this word mindset, we always think it's a mental thing. But in the world of the fighter pilot, it's actually a mental thing supported by action. Like you can be intentional about what the future looks like. You can look at the front of the jigsaw puzzle box and say that's what I want to be. But when you tip the jigsaw out, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I put the 1,000 parts of life together to fulfill the big picture? So if you think of, I was 5 years old when I dreamed of becoming a fighter pilot. It took me 17 years, 22. I flew an F-18 Hornet for the first time solo. Then I was a fighter pilot after training, maybe 9 years. And at no point are you ever on top of it. At no point do you fly a mission and nail it. And you don't know all the knowledge you need to know because it's just shy of infinite. Like there is so many. The thing about operating at speed in an airplane is every degree and every 1 knot of speed, when you have 30 airplanes in the air, is a multiple of 30, and it changes the picture second by second. So yeah, if we don't look at life as understanding that there is a consequence of my decisions and actions. Whereas as a fighter pilot, you're like, what does this tiny correction mean? How's everything going to change? And that's how you start to live your entire life. You're not risk averse, but you're really good at risk management and saying, well, I've only got so many hours in the day. I've only got so much energy. So do I invest in this? Do I invest in that? And you create a way of looking at the world, which is, unless I can clearly articulate the impact of my actions, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to waste the seconds of the day in work that doesn't deliver something. So that's kind of the whole premise of the book. First of all, it's releasing yourself from perfection, and then how do you invest 100% in what you can control? And really, that's just you. That's you being the best version of yourself. And often we want to be the best version of ourselves, but our past, our narrative, our biases shape our beliefs, and then we behave in a way in what we believe in. So the true driver of change is really getting into that autopilot, which is again what they do as a fighter pilot. They have to create these people that just have this self-belief that's off the charts. That is just like, I can crush any situation that I'm put in front of.
No, that's interesting. And one of my questions as you're saying that, because I'm thinking about this, it seems like there's a very fine line, because I've heard this before. Like, you control what you can control. I played sports. Control what you can control. What you can't control, it just happens. It's how you respond to it. So you're however that works. But how do you, as a person, and specifically a fighter pilot or a leader, how do you can know that, but you're also trying to still be the very best? How do you find that line of when you realize you're maybe going a little bit too far towards the perfectionist part again, and you need to self-correct and go, I need to let things go a little bit more? How do you work with people to, I guess, understand where they're at and see where they're maybe missing the mark a little bit, and how do they self-correct in the moment like that?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to, and I learned this, I was diagnosed with ADHD about 3 or 4 years ago. Can't remember exactly. My son was struggling at school, and part of the ADHD assessment for him was his parents had to be assessed. And I was like, yep, I kind of knew I probably had it anyway, but I scored 99.6% on the self-assess scale, which is like off the charts. So I can imagine sliding doors. If I wasn't a fighter pilot, I'd probably be overdosed somewhere in San Francisco by now. So lucky sliding doors because the system gave me what I think everyone needs. So ADHD amplifies what we all are kind of becoming in the digital world, which is unless you're really interested in something, you're not going to focus on it. And if there's a distraction, you're going to prioritize it because it's new, it's shiny, right? So when we talk about what you can control, time is one thing that in part you can control and in part you can't. So what you can control in time is I call it like sequencing, like missionization. So let's say you want to be Tiger Woods, right? And you're 10 years old and you know that if I want to be Tiger Woods and I'm passionate, I'm practicing, then I'm going to get there. But not every kid gets there, obviously. So I think there's a couple of things that are missing. The first is this idea of I'm not there yet, which means that within this massive aspiration, I'm going to have days, a lot of more of these days than the other days, which is winning, where I'm going to shank the ball, I'm going to hook, I'm going to slice. Things are going to happen that I don't want to have happen. So the immediate trigger then is, oh, okay, I just haven't nailed that shot yet. So be comfortable in where you are in the journey right now. Then there's the 10,000 hours of practice. Where there's a nuance to that word is it's 10,000 hours of intentional practice, which can mean, doesn't necessarily mean 10,000 hours of hitting a ball. It could be 10,000, it can be hours of visualization. It can be hours of memorization. So as a fighter pilot, you have to memorize about 300 checklist items, right? From 1 to 300. It takes about 6 weeks to do it. When you look at it, you're like, how could I possibly learn these 300 things from 1 to 300 and do it every single day? But you're just not there yet. You just practice and practice and practice. But there's a lot of intentionality around that because by doing that really well, what we understand as fighter pilots is we value cognitive bandwidth. So when it comes to learning, there's only so much you can learn in a day before the brain just fades out or gets overflowed or your memory just gets overridden. So if there's a limited amount in what you can memorize each day, let's make sure we memorize the most important things we possibly can. So you can control that, right? So you can control the hours of the day that you invest your time in. What you can't control is the weeks and months when not yet turns into I'm there. That's the unknown. And what you learn with ADHD, and there's a great book by a guy called Johan Hari called Stolen Focus, is this constant engagement in technology and engaging what we call the task positive network of the brain. We have lost the ability to understand time. We can make time go very quickly because we can doom scroll for 2 hours and it feels like 10 minutes. Back when we were bored and we didn't have that opportunity, we were far more thoughtful and considered, and we did a much deeper level of learning, which is cognitive engagement rather than passive consumption. So you can control not being on your phone. You can control the value of every second of your day. You can doom scroll on your phone, but do it with intention. Create a time in the day, which is just not about learning. But on the flip side, when I say missionization, you should be able to create 3 objectives per day, like 3, I'm going to achieve this today. And if you just give yourself 60 to 90-minute blocks with no interruption, on the balance, you will get them done. I do it every day, so I know you can do it. And what happens when you start this is you're way too optimistic. You know the story, someone wants to run a marathon, they go out on their first day, they run 10 kilometers. I'm so unfit, I'm unhealthy, I can't run a marathon. Because they didn't control what they could control, which is the size of the expectation based on where you are in the journey. So you learn all these things when it comes to fighting a jet and being in air combat. But as I reflect back on it, it works in everything. Replace fighter jet with life or skill set. But The pilot is in control of that because that's, you are in control of your life. You are in control of how you respond to things and what you invest your time in. And then from there, you got to take that life and that skill set and navigate the battle space, and understand that the more you kind of write to memory what you can control, the easier it is to think on your feet when you're in battle.
Yeah. I love what I got 3 examples I was just thinking of right when you said, like, the "I'm not there yet." And I love that because saying that, it keeps you on the journey and trying to get to where you're going to, but it also frees you from the, "I haven't been able to do it." And I was specifically thinking of 3 things. One was work. Um, as I was learning, I've been in the recruiting space a little over 10 years now and learning sales, and I had leaders, thankfully, great leaders pouring into me, and they kind of use that a lot. "Hey, man, you're on your path. You're just not there yet. Keep going, keep going." And then I remember getting to those points where I was there and looking back and being like, man, I can't wait to share this with someone else who's in that spot and can kind of share my knowledge on what that journey looks like. And then I actually used it this past weekend. I told you I was golfing. I have a friend who's better than me. I'm bigger than him. I should outdrive him, but I haven't been able to. But last year, I was like, next year, I'm going to outdrive you. I'm going to do it. And then I did it this year, but it was last year was the mission of like, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to do it. And I practiced and accomplished it. And then I was thinking personal life, my wife, we have financial goals or things we want to accomplish. And we're constantly keeping each other in check by saying, like, we're going to get there. We're just not there yet. We're going to get there. We're just not there yet. So the switch isn't disappointment because we're not there. It's almost more exciting because we know we can get there. We're working on it. We're taking the proper steps. But that just resonated really big with me because I've heard it and started using it. And I don't even know who taught me that or where I got it from, but the "I'm not there yet, but I'm gonna get there" thought is something I practice a lot, and I'm glad I do because it probably, if I didn't think that way, maybe it would make me a little more, I don't know, like, sad that I'm not where I wanna be, or, a lot of people, they expect things to happen so fast, like you said, and there's this journey you gotta go through for everything you do, life, profession, anything.
Yeah, and it's, you're lucky in that you kind of think that way. A lot of people don't, and just the fact that you just said, wow, I've got all this knowledge. I can't wait to share it. That is not how most leaders think. And again, you look at the statistics, like 73% of people don't trust their leaders. They think their leaders are in it for themselves. So you're unique, mate, in the way you see the world. The the circles that I mix in, that where I'm implementing these programs, it's like, oh wow, that's this great idea. I've never even thought of that before. And that's a symptom for just being too caught up in the busyness of life that you're just not even, or you've given up. I think it's Brene Brown. I'm going to paraphrase her here, but she says, disappointment lives in an unmet expectation. And there's kind of two things you can do when it comes to not meeting an expectation: do the work and meet it, or lower it. And so much in life is lowering expectation. It doesn't sound very high performance, but if the Air Force said, okay, here we go, we've got 19, 20, 21-year-old kids coming off the street, no skills, nothing. Our expectation is for them to be a fighter pilot. And that you've got 1 week, let's go. You would just have a whole bunch of demotivated, horrible fighter pilots. But the system says, okay, take 6 years to become a really great fighter pilot. And we're going to build a system where every single day of that 6 years is a little bit more than the day before. And we're going to institutionalize that. Now, that just doesn't exist in anywhere in the world, right? Which is why everyone relies on talent, because talented people, they're gifted in certain things and they find their niche and they're great. But at the same time, you don't have to be talented, right? If you're growth minded and you spend every day, and in the world of fighter pilots, we call this the debrief, but the debrief in the world of the fighter pilots actually becomes an entire cognitive model for the person. You just look at everything. And in a debrief, you're just asking 4 questions. What's the expectation? What's reality? Why is there a gap between the two? And what's an action I can take in the next 24 hours to close the gap? Which is a really great way to chunk down ambition, because ambition is big, actions are small, and bringing the two together is quite difficult for a human being to do, because as we said before, we just think, it's called the optimism bias. We think everything is easier than it actually is. It's I guess how we do dumb stuff like go and hunt saber-toothed tigers and mammoths back in the day, jump out of airplanes. I don't know, but there's a certain amount of evolution that needs that. But when you're running teams, and you want the optimum performance in leadership, yeah, it's not a great model to rely on. It just leaves your results to chance rather than kind of guaranteeing them.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up debrief because I was going to ask you about that because I saw like the 4-step process that you have when you're working with these companies and organizations, and I specifically looked at it in your Afterburner Advantage book. And what is the challenge? Because these organizations you all work with, large enterprise companies, they've got to move fast. There's shareholder value they've got to exceed or meet, and so a lot of times they're probably just running 100 miles an hour, just trying to get things done. How do you get buy-in from these leaders to implement maybe a time where they pause, look at everything, see what needs to be changed, but also take that time as they do things to debrief instead of just moving on to the next thing and trying to correct on the go? How do you and I'm sure you're explaining the importance to them of why they need to do this, but what are the big challenges you all face and see in organizations? And again, sports leagues and companies, but what's the big problems you see and are able to help them uncover as they become better performers?
I think importantly, what people perceive as speed when you're not a fighter pilot is not speed.
Yeah.
Uh, it's
Good
it's
point.
actually, yeah, it what you're sensing is this perception that there's not enough time,
Yeah.
which is a situation you're creating. So the fact that we don't have enough hours in the day is an own goal. It's self-induced. And it's self-induced because we're reactive. And if you're a reactive person, there's plenty of things to react to every day. So therefore, as you get to the end of the day, you just feel like all I've done all day is just put out fires, which is language we hear all the time. Uh, so that means people are busy. Busy people don't have time to debrief. But the reason they are busy is because they're not debriefing. That's the point. So when we come into organizations, that's the first one. And the second one is, oh, we just don't have a culture that could do this. We couldn't sit in a room and admit to our mistakes. It's just not, we just wouldn't do that. It's just too uncomfortable. So there's a few solutions to that. The first is just commit to debriefing. So if you have a meeting, in theory, it's a debrief because most meetings are like, where are we at? That's what most meetings are. And leaders mostly use meetings as a security blanket. I mean, fear is the overriding driver for leadership today. It's fear of missing something, fear of missing a target, fear of making a bad decision, fear of looking like an idiot, fear of being a loser. So if we just meet a lot, then I feel more comfortable because I'm busy doing stuff. And there's this great study that was done in 2016 called Just Think. And in the study, they put people in a white room in a white chair by themselves for 6 to 15 minutes. And they said, hey, how did you enjoy that? And it was not a great experience. So the study moved the environment and said, you know what, let's do it at home on the couch. And they did it again. And people just had to sit there for 6 minutes or 15 minutes or somewhere in between. And they thought, oh, everyone would enjoy that more because you're just at home on the couch, right? And it was kind of the same, didn't really enjoy it. And one of the gentlemen on the study put his hand up and said, look, I cheated. I turned on the television. And that gave him another idea. And they went back to the white room. And this time they put electrical wires on their ankles and a button on a table. And they said, how much would you pay for us not to shock you whilst you're sitting in the room? And they're like, I'll pay you $5. Don't shock me. Anyway, turns out that during the study, 67% of men and 23% of women hit the button and gave themselves an electric shock on their own. And 20% hit it twice. And one of the deductions that came out of the study is, humans need stimulus and they would rather be busy, even if it's doing the wrong thing, than just be left with their own thoughts for 6 minutes. So this is the reactive mindset that's sort of programmed into a human, and it's unprogrammed as a fighter pilot because everything that happens, if you react to everything in combat, you're going to die because there's just too much to react to. So you've got to there's got to be a stimulus, a pause, a breath, a process, and then an action that comes afterwards. So debriefing is that pause. So debriefing is the piece where we go, hey, let's take a breath. Let's ask ourselves where we're going. So right out the gate, that's not how people review. That's not how the New York Giants did it. That's not how the Broncos did it. That's not how the professional sporting teams I worked with in Australia did it. They just reviewed the mistakes and said, do it differently next time. So it was a coach outside in, hand of God. Whereas in a debrief, it's inside out. It's the pilot self-diagnosing. And why that's important is because the pilot can link to what good looks like. Like, this is what good looks like for me when I do the play correctly. Then we can say, but it didn't happen today for some reason. And at this point, I don't know what it was. I didn't get the result that I expected. But I know the ambition. So I know the not there yet destination. I'm just at the not there yet phase of time. So the C, it's called ORCA, objective result cause action. So the C is, what's the cause of this gap? If a human being engages in their own problem solving, the probability of it being a memory is 7 times higher than being told something, right? So if you troubleshoot, and the reason we do this as a team is because in a formation, there might be a very young fighter pilot and they're like, I don't know. And then there's going to be like a Top Gun instructor who kind of knows everything, or a squadron commander or a flight commander. There's going to be experience in the room. But if the pilot can't self-diagnose, then the peer will come in and say, look, what was going through your mind? What were the cues leading up to that moment where something went wrong? And they deconstruct what we call deconstruct the timeline. So all the thoughts and decisions and actions that led up to that. And then rather than say, so do this next time, you ask, so what would you do next time? And they will tell you, and that's the action. So the point of a debrief is the action part. The point of corporate debriefs and professional sporting teams is the looking back and saying, you did this wrong. And coaches fall into this trap where a lot of coaches feel like, I've got to have all the answers. I'm the coach of an NFL team. And if I don't have all the answers, I'm not a good coach. But the complete opposite is true. And with the Giants and with the Broncos, when we did debriefing, we kicked the coaches out of the room. They weren't even in there during the debriefs. So the players did it first, then the coaches came back in and they tied the ribbon around the unknowns. Equally, there was a lot of time invested in the offensive team, the defensive team, and the special teams. But most of the issues were on the gaps in between. So they started to debrief, within their stovepipes, but then also together, because obviously when a defensive formation was talking about what they were seeing, that gave the offensive formation, oh, that's what I can observe in other teams. So you had this kind of peer group accountability learning rather than directive learning. And, the New York Giants, they to this day were the worst performing team to ever win a Super Bowl. And that was the very first NFL team we ever worked with at Afterburner. It wasn't me, it was the team. And what's great about Afterburner is I can put any one of my 24 pilots into any organization anywhere in the world, and they will still achieve that level of result because it's the DNA of how they think. That's the key here. So if you translate that into life, and if you think of life as a journey a journey where tomorrow should be a little bit better than it was today, and debriefing unlocks that. And even when you have a stumble and tomorrow wasn't that good, well, you've still unlocked a learning point because there's always a reason. In football, it was like, oh, it's football. It's what happens. It's football. And it's like, no, it's not football. It's the player that dropped the ball, the quarterback that threw the pick. Like everything that's happening here, there is a human root cause to it. And then it starts to remove those excuses. It's like we expect there to be a certain error count on every game. And it's like, okay, so are we subconsciously telling the players go out there and make 7 mistakes because that's okay? Or are we saying we want the minimum amount of mistakes, and when it gets to 7, we're going to have a really big debrief because that's not the number we want to get to? And it's fascinating psychology. I call it the egg and spoon race theory. Like if you run with the egg and spoon and you don't look at the egg, you're more likely to get to the other end. But when you watch the egg, you start to micromanage it, and it'll fall off. So it's a little bit like that in life as well. It's like you can only focus on one thing at a time. The brain can't do 2 things. So if you're learning how to play golf, there's probably 200 things you're not doing right now. So you've just got to go through this. I was on a podcast the other day with a baseball coach, and even he was sort of saying, you know what, I'm teaching 12-year-old kids how to play, and I'm giving them 3 or 4 things at a time to work on, and I'm wondering why they're not, developing. And that's what you do as a fighter pilot. You're like, nail this skill first. Got it? Locked in? Boom, let's go on to the next skill. Got it? Locked in. Even the first mission you fly is just literally pull back, go up, push forward, go down, left bank, right bank, fast and slow. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it. That's
Yeah.
that is how you start your journey as a fighter pilot. At the end of it, you're doing crazy stuff. You're flying with 48 other airplanes, you're dropping bombs, you're shooting stuff. I mean, it's just next level. But yeah, so I just feel like my whole purpose in life is to just help people understand the potential within, and that not realizing it is a self limiter. Like you are the handbrake, right? And that once you start this reflective practice, I just call it reflecting with intention, intentional reflection. So rather than just generally looking back and being hard on yourself, just dial it in to a small thing on a 24-hour basis that can just build these incremental goals. I mean, by the time you get your fighter pilot qualification, that last mission, it's literally just the tiniest step. It's almost like a what's the word? Can't remember. It's a letdown a little bit. It's like, oh, is that the first time I flew solo in an F-18 Hornet, 17 years, and I flew it and I landed. I'm like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's my, you know. So, so we have all these massive life dreams and ambitions, and if you think of it as that's the only time I'm going to be happy is when I achieve the big goal. The Air Force was awesome because I got to fly 400 missions and win or almost lose and lose one on the way and still get there. So you get every day to have a win. And that's just what we don't do very well as humanity. We don't find joy because we can't create the small win each and every day.
Yeah. Well, for lack of a better term, this is freaking awesome, Boo. Because I'm sitting here thinking, I played college football, and I remember watching film and breaking things down and debriefing, and it just seems like you do have to be intentional about it. And I was thinking it's probably tougher than ever for people, or maybe there's more people now who aren't as intentional about it. Because you talked about earlier, you're like you can doom stroll, and and people just they get depressed and they don't know why, but they're also not taking the time to debrief and look back and see like why they're depressed. It's more just kind of like blaming things and just. So I think these conversations need to happen more. Like what you're doing and your inspiration to help people discover what needs to be discovered. Man, that's so important because there's never been more people who need help with this, and you do it at a high level with companies and organizations, but just someone like myself who would watch this conversation, I would hope it would click and something would switch to where I look back and go like, okay, what am I doing? Because with you use the example of fighter pilot. If you kind of overthink or you're going to die potentially, and we don't have that as humans most days with our decisions of it's life or death. But in a way, it could be because if I'm not intentional about not scrolling and instead of doing that, reading a book, maybe I'm costing myself hundreds of thousands of dollars because I'm not improving my knowledge to be better at work, or I'm not going to take the time to build a business, and you're losing all of these things. And there's probably so many bad effects it can have on you by not being intentional and debriefing and figuring out how to maximize your life and to accomplish these things. And so, we can, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I was like, wow, there's probably so many people not living up to their potential and accomplishing great things just because of other factors and not debriefing and looking at, how can they improve? So that was a thought going through my head as you were talking. I was just like, man, this is so good.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book. The next book's more, the other books were kind of textbooky. This is a bit more a story because I think, for me, I'm like, I get on stage at a keynote, there's 200 people, the other day, 3,000 people. And you just know in 1 hour, some people are going to go and do some work afterwards, but most people aren't. So I wanted to just write a book that was really easy to read, like it's literally written for a 12-year-old, but it's written for CEOs because the concepts are so simple. What it needs to do is break through the noise of what life is in the digital world. The book for me was like, is this a way that I can connect with kind of individuals for them? I don't care. I got no skin in the game for a personal win here. I didn't write the book for me. I just have seen people do it outside the Air Force. I have watched companies grow 400% in a year when they really dial into this. I get people who reach out to me 8 years after I've spoken to them. I've had someone tell me, I was in the music industry. I was lying on my couch in my mum's house for 3 years. I'd given up, and I saw your keynote, and now I'm managing 6 bands. I've got my mojo back, and it's like, and I just did that debriefing stuff,
Yeah.
you know. So I just watch it in action, and I read a lot of books, and I consume a lot. And there's a lot of this is the problem and this is what you do out there in the world. A little bit like this, you need to 100% control everything in your life. You control what you can control, but there's not a lot of here's how. And if there is here's how, it's like 10 steps here, 20 steps there, do this, journal. It's like your entire life is just given over to personal development and self-awareness, which in itself instills anxiety, because when you start to become self-aware, the 11 million bit per second computer can really play tricks with you. So what I love about debriefing, or what I love about the ORCA mindset, because it's a mindset, is it's just 4 steps. That's it. It's the future connected to today, reflecting on the past, and then driving action back into the future. So it covers the thing that we can't do very well, which is manage time. And it introduces a discipline, or don't even call it a discipline, just a good habit that allows you to finally optimize the hours in your day and to finally do things that on a daily basis surprise you with how well it went. And then what happens? You become confident. You start to build your self-worth. I am a worthy person because I get things done and people respect that. You become more capable. But most importantly, you free up the bandwidth to be better at home. You have more time to be a better dad, a better mom, a better brother, uh, a better son. Because right now, the time where we're meant to be human and connected, we have nothing left in the tank because technology sucked that out of us during the day and just fed us all that cheap dopamine. We don't get the dopamine hit from our fathers telling us we did a good job, or the dopamine hit from playing soccer in the backyard with your son for 45 minutes, just tedious, what feels like a tedious 45 minutes, only to see him kick a goal that he's never kicked before, you know? So, I would love to give people that time back in their life, and to be reconnected as the universe and the world is taking us the other way.
Your mission is, like I said, I think it's very much needed and it's incredible. And I love having these conversations because it inspires me to continue chipping away and debriefing and figuring out how I can be the best person for my wife and for my family and for my business and for my friends. And so I'm constantly, I feel like I'm thinking about that. But now with the term debrief, I think it's something I'm going to be more intentional about each day. I'm just kind of maybe before I fall asleep, even just thinking about, okay, how did today go? What do I want
Yeah,
tomorrow to?
yeah, and I know people that journal, and journaling's great, but just if you just bring ORCA into it, it's a little bit more intentional about the journaling, because it's good. There's good psychology to get thoughts from your head and onto paper where they're a bit more obvious. But if you start to put action into it, I mean, if you think of most arguments that happen in a relationship are based on what someone's doing. Like, you did this, you hurt me. Very rarely do we say, "Oh, okay, but what does good look like?" But that's what the debrief does. It elevates what good looks like. There's frustration, there's emotional response in the world. I'm feeling out of kilter. So the first thing I ask myself is, what am I trying to achieve here? What does good look like? And in a relationship, even if you just do that once a week with your husband or your wife, even your kids, it's like that whole story. I hate school. I don't like schoolwork. Well, we're caught in the doing. We're not lifting it to the aspiration. And it's like, hey, okay, look, let's not have a conversation about schoolwork or do your homework. What do you want to be in life? Like, what gets you excited? What do you want to do? I don't know. I don't know. Well, look, let's do the schoolwork, because that's going to give you options, right? Take a year off after school. There's no rush. And let's take the 68% you're getting now, and let's make that 70. Let's not make it 98.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just make it 70. Let's just get 2% more. And that recurring mistake that you keep making in your math homework, let's just dial that in this week. Let's just do that one thing, because that one thing, when you conquer it, releases dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, which means all the other stuff gets easier as well. But it's the thing. Debriefing releases you from being bogged down in the negativity. It releases you from the burden of failure, which releases cortisol and does the opposite. It halves your energy and halves your brain power. So it's a very in psychology they call it cognitive behavioral therapy. It's effectively saying use your cognition, your brain, as therapy to modify the way you behave, and that's kind of what debriefing does.
No, that's perfect. Boo, I've got one last question for you. And I ask everyone this who comes on the podcast, just from a Books for Guys standpoint. And you mentioned earlier you read a lot. And so I'm curious to know what is a book or two that has meant a lot to you personally or professionally? And what's a book that you love to recommend to other people?
Look, I think there were two books that I read as a teenager before I joined the Air Force, and they were Norman Schwarzkopf's biography and Colin Powell's autobiography, and they were big, thick books. But what I took away from that was these two incredibly accomplished human beings. You know, one dude won the Gulf War, and the other one was the Joint Chiefs at the time, and then became a politician. But when you read the books, they were deeply human. They made mistakes. Colin Powell refurbished Volvos, for goodness sake. And I think for me, that carried through my whole career as I never felt intimidated by authority, because people can be, right? It's that whole not there yet. And I would know that under all of these incredible leaders that I admired and they were my mentors, they're all human. Everybody takes a dump. And that to me, those were the two most powerful books. I really struggle with self-help books because, the challenge with a lot of them is they're a silo and they have to be able to be sold. You've got to silo your content, right? But success in life is about integration. It's yes, in business is integration. You want to be a good business leader and a CEO, you've got to be really good at integrating, because there's a whole bunch of silos that need to be pulled together. And what I love about a fighter pilot as well is you're always trained right from the get-go to be an integrator, which means that whenever you fly a mission, we're all in service to the mission objective, not to the hierarchy of the squadron and the organization. And that as well, I think a lot of people, long answer to a short question here, sorry, mate. For example, a mentor, people are afraid to ask someone to mentor them. But again, everyone's human and most people want to help. It's just no one asks. So I think those two books kind of gave me some insight into the humanity of leadership. I don't think there's many books like that anymore, because I don't think there's many leaders like that anymore. But that to me is really important. And in Flawless Leadership, one of the pillars of it is human-centric leadership and connection, and having the time to do that.
Well, hopefully what you guys are doing can help spark more of those leaders out there, because they are needed. And again, Boo, I mean, I'm personally taking so much away from this conversation. I'm amped up, I'm jacked up. This has been one of my favorite conversations I have, just because I love your positivity and clarity and purpose, and what you're trying to do, and what you have done already. And I can only imagine just how many more people you'll be able to affect in a positive way with the work that you're doing, and just the way you speak of things, and how you want to help. You have the desire to help. You can hear it in your voice of just wanting to help people, with really not wanting anything in return. You just want to see people succeed, and that's my favorite people to be around. There's nothing better than seeing someone, like I said earlier, the light bulb clicks, or you're able to help somebody. We all want to help. It's what I take away is don't be afraid to ask for help, and then don't be afraid to send the elevator back down to help others get to where you're at too when they reach out, because it's a really important thing. But Boo, man, this has been great. I'm so proud to spotlight your book on our website. I know you've got another one coming out. We're gonna get that one spotlighted too. I can't wait for that to drop, and I'm so glad you brought that up. But man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and just keep doing what you're doing, because guys like me, and I know people who will watch or listen to this, they're going to take something from it, be inspired from it, and hopefully, make some changes, do more debrief, and improve, all areas of life. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about that today.
It's Chris. And look, I find what you're doing very inspiring. I mean, what you're doing with Book4Guys is so many people just wouldn't do it. It's not a, hey, I can scale this up and become a billionaire kind of a commitment. It's a genuine commitment to helping people be better. And it must be a passion project. It must consume an awful lot of time. So it's, like-minded. I'm so honored to be on the show and to help you in any way. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the kind words, and we'll keep chipping away at it and doing what we can from our side. But no, I appreciate it, Boo. This was great.
Thanks, mate. So what's the next goal? I mean, you got